For our table runner, you're going to need a half a yard of your dark fabric, a half a yard of your medium fabric, and a quarter of a yard of your light fabric. You really want to make sure you have a light, medium, and dark to get the 3D effect. You can have a tonal print, but if you do a big print or something that's very printy, it will take away from the overall 3D effect. It still looks nice, but if you want the 3D, make sure you're using more tonal fabrics. So from the light, medium, and dark, you're going to cut two 4.5-inch strips out of each piece. Okay. Then we're going to sew strip sets together. You're going to do, for the dark, you're going to do a dark light. So you're going to put the dark and the light together. You're going to do the light and the medium together, and the medium and the dark together. Okay. So you'll have 3 strip sets. Dark and light together, light and medium, medium and dark. You're going to sew them together with a 1/4-inch seam, and you want to press that seam open. When you're done, your strip should equal 8.5 inches long. If they don't, you really want to make sure that they're all nice and even, because that will affect how our triangles are put together. Now that we have our strips sewn, we're going to cut our triangles. We're going to use the Creative Grid 60-degree triangle. I like this one because it's got grips on the back, it's 12.5 inches long, and it has a blunt tip on the top. That helps me to discern the size of my strip. So if you sewed it correctly, your strip should be 8.5 inches long. So you want the blunt tip to be flat on the one side, the 8.5-inch line to go directly across the bottom, and the 4 1/4 to go nice and flat along the seam line. If one of those is off, you want to make sure you go back, inspect your strip, and fix it before you cut your triangles. If you don't do that, the lines, when we make our table runner, will not line up. So if we're all set, we're going to cut the right side on the first one. Then we're going to cut the left side, and I know this is an awkward cut, but we only really have to do it for the first one. Okay, we're going to lift our ruler up, we're going to lift our triangle up, and we're going to leave our strip where it is. I'm going to move my strip over so you can see it in the camera, but you really don't want to move the strip. You want to lay it nice and flat. Then we're going to take our triangle, we're going to turn it right side up, and we're going to do the same exact thing. We're going to make sure the top is level, the bottom is running across the 8.5-inch mark, and the seam line is running across the 4 1/4 mark. If all of those line up and it's nice and flat here, you can just go ahead and make another cut. And you only have to do the right side. If you go to cut and there's a little extra fabric over here, just trim that off. You want to constantly keep it, making sure that that 4 1/4 line is running along the seam line. And you're going to go ahead and you're going to cut 3 triangles with the ruler this way, and 3 triangles with the ruler this way to yield 6 triangles out of 1 strip. You're going to do that for all 3 strip sets. From the leftover medium and dark fabrics, you're going to cut one 8.5-inch strip. Okay. Then we're going to take our 60-degree triangle, and we're going to cut 2 triangles from each strip. So we'll have 2 medium hole triangles and 2 dark hole triangles. And remember, on the first cut, you have to cut both sides. Then you can bring it over and just cut the one. So we're going to do that until we have 2 dark triangles and 2 medium triangles. Then we can put it together. Now that all of our triangles are cut, we're going to start to construct the table runner. I always find it easy to kind of lay out the cube block before we start sewing each side, because we're going to sew it in sides, the left side, then the right side, and we're going to put it together. So we're going to take these triangles that are just whole fabrics, and we're going to set them aside for now. Then we're going to grab our triangles. I like to grab the triangles that have the light color on the bottom and do those first. So I'm going to lay that up here. Then I'm going to lay the one next to it that has the light, and you'll see a medium and a dark. Then I'm going to find the triangle that has the small dark side and lay it next to it. So now we have the 2 darks there. Now I'm going to find the triangle that has the small medium green, and we're going to lay that there. So now we've got 2 mediums. Now we're left with just 2 triangles, and we're going to line up the outside dark to dark, medium to medium. Okay, so there's 3 of each triangle, and I've just stacked them on top of each other for ease to be able to see. We're going to kind of take the right side and just scooch it away for now. Now we're going to take the top 2 and we're going to pull one of them aside. We're going to put them right sides together, and you really want to make sure that this top part that's flat lines up, that the seam in the middle line up and they lay right on top of each other. I like to put a pin on each side of that seam. That way I know it's nice and lined up, and then the bottom should line up. If your strips are 8.5 inches, the bottom should naturally line up. To make sure that you have it together perfectly, you can open it up and you can see if that seam will line up. If the seam doesn't line up right now, it's not going to line up when you sew it. But if all 3 of those line up well, you're going to go ahead and sew this with a 1/4 inch seam, and you want to open that seam, and you're going to do it for the other 2 triangle sets that match this one. After we sew these 2 together, we're going to sew our 3rd triangle onto the bottom. Make sure you line up the dark with the dark from the outside, and you're going to line up the same way. You're going to line up the seams in the middle. Let me move these out of the way so you can see better. You want to line up the seams in the middle, the flat edge on top, and the corner here. I like to put in 3 pins, and then you're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam and open that seam, and you're going to do it for all 3 sets. Now we have half of our cubes sewn. We're going to go ahead and take our medium green triangles, and we're going to add it to the bottom of 2. So we're going to take our triangle, we're going to lay it down, and you want the flat side on the same side as the flat sides that were there before, and we're going to flip it on top. Okay, we're going to push it till we get these lines lined up, and you will see I didn't cut the dog ears off on this last section, and they will line up as well. I wait to cut my dog ears off until after the whole thing is quilted, because I have to trim it up anyway, so it's just one less step I have to do. Okay, and we're going to put about 2 to 3 pins in it, and you really want to make sure that both of these sides line up nice. You notice that there's going to be a little extra bit here. That's because this is a full corner and this one here has the blunt corner. That's perfectly fine. It's going to end up in the seam. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to sew this seam. We're going to open it, and we're going to do it for 2 sets. So we're going to do 2 sets that have it on the bottom and 1 won't. Now we're going to put this side together. So we're going to take the 2 that have the triangles on the bottom, and we're going to sew them together. Then we're going to take the one that doesn't have the triangle, and we're going to sew it to the bottom so they're all in one big strip. Here's what one side of the table runner looks like. We're now going to sew the other side, then we'll put the 2 sections together. It already starts to look 3D. Doesn't that look great? Now we have the other side, and we had laid this out previous and just kind of set it aside but kept it in the same order. If you're unsure of whether or not these are in the same order, you can lay them next to your table runner, the other side that you have finished, to make sure that you have them correct. I like to keep the big side light on top, then I know the light is on top, these 2 will match, and these 2 will match. So then I don't have to worry about it. And we're going to do the same thing we did with the other one. We're going to take these 2, flip them on top each other, and we're going to sew all 3 of them together. Now that we have these 2 sewn together, we're going to sew the last one to finish out our cube. And you're going to do the same thing. You're going to lay it on top, pin it, and sew all 3 of them. Side part of our cubes done. We're going to take our last 2 triangles, which are the dark green, and we're going to add it to 2 of the 3, just like we did on the left side. Now that we have those triangles on the bottom, we're going to do the same thing we did to the other side. We're going to sew these 2 together with the triangles, with the green triangles together, and then the last one without the green triangle on the bottom. And then we'll have our right side complete. Now that we have both sides sewn, We're gonna lay them next to each other. Then we're gonna flip one on top of the other, making sure to pin each of the points so they match, and then sew that long seam and iron the seam open. And then the top of our table runner is done. Here's what the table runner looks like with the top finished. You can go ahead and finish it however you choose. I tend to put the backing and batting and lay the top on top and pillowcase it as opposed to adding a binding. Sometimes I think the binding takes away from the 3D effect. Alrighty, we'll see you next week.